bring about the level that Mashiach comes, it's going to be va'averes roch hatumah min ha'aretz. We explained that the Rebbe Marash says in the Maimon that when we are in a state that we hate Sitra Achra, that we despise Sitra Achra, so then the Eibishter as well causes, and the Eibishter as well responds in kind. Ves Ace of Sanesi, and therefore when he hates the Klippa and Sitra Achra with a complete hate, and just like by Tzaddik Gomer, that the complete hate and despising the bad means there's no room for the bad whatsoever. The same thing we explained throughout the Maimer, that by the Eibishter hating the Klippa and Sitra Achra in totality, so then there's no room for the Klippa Sitra Achra even to be yoinik, even to nurse from the level of Acharayim, even from the level of the back and the external level. And to do so, the Rebbe Marash said, is, and the Rebbe brought earlier, since everything that we do, everything that's going to come about when Mashiach comes, has to come as a result of our avodah. So the Rebbe Marash says, it's through the Yidden hating the bad down here, that's what causes Hashem to hate the bad, and therefore that type of complete eradication of Tumah and Klippa that will happen when Mashiach comes. The Rebbe posed a question. How does that fit in with who we are? This level of hating bad, we identified before with the level of Tzaddikim and Tzaddikim Gemurim. And like the Rebbe was saying, most of us are in a state where it's halavai beinani. Hopefully, we wish to be a beinani. We're not really on that level. So what does it mean that through our hating, how is it possible that we can affect this if seemingly this avoidam of hating is not something that's applicable to every single yid? And it's not only is not applicable to every single yid, but it's really a rare person, the tzaddik gomer, that hates the ra in totality. So therefore, how can we affect this type of thing of Mashiach's times? So just before we get to the answer, the Rebbe's approach is that there are, and we see this not just for the Rebbe, but we see this when we learn Tanya, as opposed to, let's say, maybe other Mamar Chassidus. There is the big totality of a person's approach, and then there is the individual and directed approach in a particular matter. For example, there's a classic term in Chassidus that we constantly talk about. There's iskafia, sublimating, subjugating the bad, which means we still have bad, but we do not surrender to it. We choose to act not in accordance with that bad. Then there's ishapcha. Ishapcha is that we transform the bad, meaning that we have no desires for bad, we have only desires for good. Now, in Tanya, in general, Likutei Amarim, he identifies iskafia with the avodah of the Beinani and ishapcha with the avodah of the tzaddik. Yet in many Mamar Chassidus, we find the idea of ishapcha associated with, in general, we're doing the avodah of iskafia and ishapcha. So how does that fit in with Tanya? But Chassidus, and even in Kabbalah, but in Chassidus we find this a lot, that the same terms are used in different situations, and some of them can be very broad and some can be very narrow. So in the broad totality of the relationship of a nefesh elokis with nefesh habahamis, yes, only the tzaddik has completely come to a state of where he has affected ishapcha in the nefesh habahamis. He has completely transformed and elevated nefesh habahamis, that now the nefesh habahamis wants the same thing like nefesh elokis. That's the tzaddik. And perhaps even in the utmost degree, based on what we spoke about before, the tzaddik gomer. The Beinani, on the other hand, the Beinani is shaykh to the battle. The Beinani is in the level of iskafia. He has to sublimate. He has to subjugate the nefesh habahamis. The nefesh habahamis wants this, and the nefesh elokis says otherwise. That's in the big picture. But then there is in the individual challenges that a person has. And the Rebbe puts it like that a person needs to often push the envelope. So, for example, when it comes to individual challenges, then we have the idea that for what one person might be in a way of iskafia, for another person it's in a way of ishap. Meaning, let's say, for those of us living in Los Angeles, we know of this institution on La Brea Avenue known as Pink's. And sometimes when you're walking by it, there's a big reich nichoyach coming out from it, the Lashon Sagi Noher. Now, I imagine for most of the people here by the Shir, walking by Pink's is not a big iskafia to control themselves not to go in and buy a hot dog over there. It's because when it comes to that particular part of their avodas Hashem, they have transformed themselves, or they never have a battle with that. There's no issue over there. So in that regard, there is an ishapcha when we're dealing with certain individual things. Then there are other things that for each one of us may be a very difficult battle. And we can only deal with it in a way of iskafia. And I need to force myself not to do A, B, or C. And then the Rebbe says, there are things that are like on the fence. Things that I'm battling with, but it's possible really to push it into a place where it's not going to be a battle, where it's going to be in a way of ishapcha, making sure to, let's say, daven with a minyan 3 times a day. Yeah, sometimes I got to force myself to do it, but I can make it such an adoption that I'm just giving an example where it's going to become like so natural that it's going to be in a way of ishapcha. So in other words, what I'm trying to say is there is the iskafia and ishapcha as the big picture, the entirety of the nefesh bahamis. Yes, that's not applicable to the Beinani, and definitely not below the Beinani. But when we talk about a different definition or a different application of iskafia and ishapcha, when we're talking about individual actions, individual attitudes, yes, we have the world of ishapcha as well. In a similar type of approach, the Rebbe is going to say that even someone that's only a Beinani, or even someone that's only aspiring to be a Beinani and has not yet reached that goal, can also have a minimal level or a short time experience of hating the bad completely. And that will be sufficient to be that extra push to bring us to the time when Hashem will reveal his hatred for the Sitra Achra and therefore completely eradicate. Let's see what the Rebbe says, page test, the end of line 9, the end of line 11. So he says, but b'chol echad ve'echad miYisrael, by every single Yid, yeshnam zmanim yuchad. There are unique and specific times, b'shas hatfiloi, b'shas eiskat Torah, either during davening or during being involved in Torah study. Or a time that he's fulfilling a mitzvah that he's really careful about, that he's really into, that really talks to him, and he, like Chassidus explains, that Zohar Beitvei means that his soul really shines in that mitzvah. Zohar from the word Zehirus, Zohar Harakia. Or even when he's involved in doing for just permitted matters, but he's doing it in a way for the sake of heaven. And how much more so when he's doing it in such a way that in all your ways you shall know him, because then he's actually knowing Hashem in the activity. It's not like l'shem shamayim that he's doing it for the sake of later on getting a spiritual benefit, but in the thing that he's doing right now, he has that type of connection with the good. At this time, when he's doing this type of avodah, whether davening, learning, etc., He's completely devoting himself in that moment to godliness. And through that, at that moment, at that time, those few minutes or hour or whatever, he is not possible. He does not have any association with what the Alter Rebbe uses in Tanya, the term, the filthy garments that the tzaddik has undressed himself up from. That he's completely, the tzaddik gomer that hates the bad, totally has completely removed the filthy garments of the nefesh habahamis, and all that remains is just the pure desire of the nefesh habahamis. That pure desire has now been harnessed to kedusha to only desire Hashem. Whereas when the nefesh habahamis is enclosed in the filthy garments, so then that desire nefesh habahamis is repurposed in the wrong way towards physical desires. But every single yid, at that moment that is completely immersed in one of these type of positive things that he enumerated before, can be in such a type of situation where it's completely disconnected from the filthy garments, like a complete tzaddik. So how does that help to be able to affect the idea of Mashiach's times? He says, the Alter Rebbe explains that when a Yid does something good, the divine revelation, known as the Yichud, the union of the different divine levels, the spiritual revelation above, which is above time, is constant and always. So the Yid's hatred for bad that he's experiencing at that 5 minutes that he's davening, for example, that's not 5 minutes above. That's always there above. Therefore, through that comes down the revelation that doesn't allow any place for the external ones, for the klippas to nurse. And the result of that is that when Mashiach comes, death will be removed forever. Let's finish the Maimon. This is what it says, that death will be removed and stopped forever. As long as the refinement of the sparks have not been completed, that there's still a mixture, and good and bad are mixed together with each other, like we said, that was the result of the Chet Eitz Hadas, that through Adam Rishon eating from the Eitz Hadas, he brought into the entire creation a mixture of good and bad. That this mixture of good and bad existed even when the Beis Hamikdash stood. Even in the times of Shlomo HaMelech, when the moon was at its fullest, meaning that the godly revelation was very powerful then, still in all, good and bad were intermingled. So therefore, he says on the top of page Yud, Yesh Inyan HaMisa, there's still the idea of death. So, why does death continue? Because we don't want bad to continue its existence as well. Therefore, there has to be death, as we mentioned at the beginning of the mind. That's why Adam Rishon was not allowed to eat from the Eitz HaChaim once he ate from the Eitz HaDas, because we didn't want that death should continue. That klippa and ra should continue. This is also the reason that tzaddikim will return to dust 1 hour before the resurrection of the dead, meaning that even those tzaddikim that are alive when Mashiach comes and that are alive during Tchias HaMesim, they will have to pass away. That's a simple pshat over here. We'll soon explain this in a different manner as well. Before they experience Tchias HaMesim, so they shall also arise from the dead. Though their bodies will not rot, and until this hour and this moment before Tchias HaMesim, the bodies of tzaddikim that passed away hundreds and thousands of years ago also did not rot and are whole. Still in all, prior to the resurrection of the dead, they will return to the earth. They will return to the level of Afar. Why is that necessary? Since through the sin of the Eitzadas, there becomes an intermingling of bad in the entire world. Therefore, even the bodies of tzaddikim, by no fault of their own, will need to have this refinement. Like it says that there are 4 tzaddikim that passed away only because of the nachash, and because since the advice and the counsel of the snake caused other magicians to eat from the Eitzadas imbued everything in this world, even tzaddikim, with this mixture of bad in their bodies. So this is the idea of death. The death is to eradicate and remove the bad that's in their body. It's a refinement of that. But the Rebbe in footnote 36 says, let's learn the footnote inside on the bottom of the page. It says, Elam, the zichuch zeh yochel lias ayidei habitol de v'nafshi ka'afro ka'otir. This refinement can take place through the bittul of my soul will be like dust before all. The az ein tzadich lachzer la'afarin kipshuto. And then you do not need to have the literal returning into the ground. And he brings from a sikha of Tafshin Memches. Remember, this mimer was issued and published and given out Muga shortly after, in connection with the Shloishim after the Rebbetzin and Tafshin Memches in 1988. This sikha the Rebbe was actually prior to that, with Shabbos Parshas Boy. This was before the Rebbetzin passed away. But it was the same year where the Rebbe said that that's the idea that tzaddikim chayzrim la'afaron does not have to mean literally that they will die, but they will reach the level of afar, and that will also accomplish the same zichuch and the removal of the bad that he talks about in the middle of the Maimer. And back to the text of the Maimer, line 9, Mash'enkin la'asad love is opposed to the future time, la'achar atchiyah, after tchiyas ha'mesim, k'sheyiyah v'esruach ha'tumah avim in the earth, when there will be that the spirit of tumah will remove from the earth, then there won't be death. Even the body will live with everlasting life. Even according to the view and the opinion that when it says in the Navi that a youth that's 100 years old will die is in the literal sense, it means physical death. It's only concerning Bnei Noach. It's only concerning Goyim will actually have physical death after the time of Esruach HaTumah Avim and Oris, after the time of Tchias HaMeis. Masha'enkim B'Negel Yisrael, as opposed to Yidin Yeh, Bilam Mavas La'Netzach, it will be fulfilled what it says in the Pasuk, that death will be swallowed, will be removed and stopped forever. The Rebbe adds, the truth is, even when we're dealing concerning Goyim, B'nei Noach, it also doesn't have to mean literal death. Even the death that will be according to this opinion. With Goyim, it's not actual death, Ela Nefila, but rather the idea of falling from their level. The man, the Nafal Medargi Ikrim means there's a lashon brought down in Chazal that someone who falls from his level is considered dead. So the Bnei Noach, when it says Ben Mea Shana Yamus, means that the Bnei Noach will fall from their level. That's what it means, Yamus. Like it's explained in the Maimer of the Reb Marash that we've been referring to the whole time. Through the sparks of holiness that will become, that were absorbed and swallowed up in the Bnei Noach, and they will become refined and will go up above. So harasha b'hem, so then the bad that's in them. So the Rebbe says, what do you mean bad? Bad has already been eradicated. It says v'sruch hatuma av ben haaretz. So what do we mean bad? We mean a relative bad, not bad as it is in the sense that we were talking about up till now, ra of klippa, but rather Hainu guf hagash mishalahem. It's talking about the physical body of the guy. It's called bad in regards and in comparison to the godly sparks, to the sparks of holiness that are in it. So therefore, the ra, the bad of the body of the guy, yipa lamata will fall below because the godly sparks will rise upward. It will mean it will have a descent in level. but it doesn't mean that they will physically die. But this is all in the nations of the world, that even that type of misa, even that type of death, which is not a literal death, but it means that they will fall from their level, is only by the nations of the world. Can be Israel as opposed to the Yidden. Also, the body will rise up as well. Also, the body will be sustained from the spiritual command neshama, just like the soul. Meaning, the body won't fall. The body won't lower itself. Not only that, then the body will be higher than the soul. The cave of the Soviv that the female will surround and encompass the male, meaning the makabel, the receiver, which is the body, and consider the female in regards to the neshama, which is the male, the mashpia. So it will encompass, it will surround, it will be a makif over the neshama. All this will be in actuality revealed down here below 10 handbreadths, but Gula Mitzvah Shlema de Mashiach's Kingdom, because of Mamish, the true and complete redemption through Mashiach, speedily in our days. Let's open it up to questions, but let's keep it short and to the point, because I want to make a dent in the next mimer in the Dvar Malchus that you should have in your downloads as well, called El Hadvar. Okay, any questions?
You said when we're davening for like that 5 minutes, that is there all the time? We're just tapping into it.
We can reach that level. We can attain, we can experience that total hate for bad, either when we're immersed in davening, or when we're immersed in learning, or when we're immersed in a mitzvah that means a lot to us, etc., etc. We can attain that. So therefore, instead of describing an unattainable goal, that when the Yidden hate the bad, that's going to bring Mashiach's hating, the Mashiach's time when the Eibush is going to hate evil and therefore eradicate death, etc., which is an unattainable thing. It's only something that's applicable to Tzaddik Gomer. Really, each one of us can reach that and may have that at certain select times. And the fact that we have it only at certain select times is not in any way detract from the thing that in the spiritual realms, it's everlasting. So that momentary hate that I have for Klippa can be enough to be able to affect that Hashem should hate the Klippa and therefore remove the tumah from the earth, etc.
It's not sustainable all the time like a tzaddik.
But that's right, because we're not the tzaddik gomer. Exactly.
It also seems like the Beinani is almost in a higher level in the sense that the Beinani, say, using pinks, has to fight that pinks every time, whereas a tzaddik gomer or a tzaddik.
Why in the end did Hashem make more Beinim than tzaddikim, and He made very, very few tzaddikim, and even less did He make tzaddikim gemorim? Because that battle is much more special to Hashem than the just coasting on very high levels of spirituality. Okay, let's begin the new mimer. Let's see how much we can get through this today. Top of the next page, page Yudal. There's a mimer that the Rebbe said also on Tafshich Chafhei. It was a nidche, it was a Tisha B'Av, came out on Shabbos and was pushed off for the Sunday. And on that Shabbos, the Rebbe said the following mimer. These are the matters that Moshe spoke. Pirish Rashi, and Rashi explained the feature in Divrei Techacha, since the topics that Moshe Rabbeinu was speaking were words and matters of rebuke, and the Torah is enumerating, Moshe Rabbeinu is enumerating all the different places that the Jewish people had angered Hashem. Like he says, Lavan and Chatzeros and Dizav. Dizav is, there's no place called Dizav. It has to do with the Eglazav, the golden calf. There's no place that's called Lavan, but Lavan is white because the man was white and they complained against the man, etc., etc. All these names are not really names. They're just hints at certain things that the Yidden did wrong. Therefore, he concealed the matter. He spoke about them obliquely. He mentioned them only in a way of a hint, because to honor the Jewish people. He didn't want to disgrace the Jewish people, to publicly speak negatively about the deed. Maybe that's Tzemach Tzedek by Torah al Sefer Dvarim that Tzemach Tzedek brings in his Sefer Torah on the Chumash Dvarim Mashiach Ba'al Shach. What the holy Alshich asked him. Alshich is one of a well-known commentary on Chumash. Here's what the Alshich says, quoting the words of the Alshich. Why did Moshe Rabbeinu choose in a concealed rebuke, and he hid it in hints? If it's because the reason that we just now said in the name of Rashi, because of the honor of the Jewish people, he didn't want to publicly disgrace them. So what happened afterwards, that Moshe Rabbeinu was not concerned about their honor. When he told them that you were rebellious, that you were angering Hashem. So it seems to be a contradiction. You're telling me he didn't want to rebuke them publicly, and then later on he does rebuke them publicly. So if he does rebuke them publicly, why in the beginning does he not rebuke them publicly? Up to here is the quote from the question of the Alsh. The Rebbe adds to this. We could add to this the L'choirach seemingly would be able to answer the Kivun Shemana Kant. Since he enumerates over here, it's not story by story. It's not like later on in Parshas Eikev where he talks about this. He's going like a package deal. All the places that they angered Hashem, he couldn't say openly and explicitly all of these cases at once, telling all the negativity at once. Like we find in parts of Balois, that when there was different punishments over there that was speaking about, so it was actually inserted by the psukim, by Hebron Soil, the three psukim to separate between two different situations of punishments that the Yidden suffered and rebuked that the Yidden suffered. So the same thing over here. Since Moshe was doing all of the rebukes, he wouldn't be able to say them all together. Therefore, he had to conceal the matters and mention it in a hint. Yet, if you examine this and you look at this closely, this is not similar to the case in Parshas Balois. Over there, it's talking about how the Parshas is written in the Torah. Here we're talking about Moshe Rabbeinu's addressing the Yidden, and Moshe Rabbeinu speaking to the Yidden as his, almost like his last will and testament. He was going to pass away on Zion Adar, Rosh Chodesh Shvat of that year. He began speaking Eila Advarim, his last will and his guidance, and etc., about the Yidden. So therefore, who forces Moshe Rabbeinu to say it all at once? And then he's trapped. Oh, I'm saying it all at once. I can't say it all at once openly. I have to hint at it. For the whole entire time, from Rosh Chodesh Shvat, when Moshe Rabbeinu began the words Eila Dvarim, until he passed away. A month, 5 weeks later, the 7th of Adar, he could have said and divided it and broke it up and said every particular rebuke separately. And not only that, not only would he say it separately, but he could have intermingled between them other things. Just like the events happened over time, he could have told and said about other things in between. And not only that, but Moshe Rabbeinu had given different mitzvahs and explained different mitzvahs in Chumash Dvarim. During this time, many matters of a mitzvah were related, both new mitzvahs and other mitzvahs that were repeated, as it was enumerated in Sefer Dvarim, Mishnah Torah. So therefore, Moshe Rabbeinu could have chosen to rebuke them openly about one thing, then related something else, maybe perhaps a new mitzvah or an old mitzvah that he was reviewing, then giving another rebuke about a different case, and so on. So what forced him to say it all together? And then, because he's saying it all together, he needs to say it in a... We'll stop over here. Any questions?
Answer your question about the